So good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Alicia Poon. I'm the Indian Arts Research Center Director here at the School for Advanced Research. And tonight it's my absolute privilege to get the opportunity to introduce Lynda Teller Pete, who has been in residence with us in Santa Fe for the last 3 months as SAR's 2024 Rollin and Mary Ella King Native Artist Fellow. So Lynda Teller Pete is a master weaver, teacher, author, and consultant based in Denver, Colorado. Originally from the Two Gray Hills and Newcomb areas of New Mexico, Lynda comes from a long line of weavers. She works closely with her sister, Barbara Teller Ornelas, to both continue and honor the Two Gray Hills weaving tradition and to forge a path forward for the next generation of Navajo weavers. In addition, she uses her platform as an artist and respected authority to educate the public about the history of Navajo weaving. Lynda's accomplishments are great. Her weavings have been winning awards at Santa Fe Indian Market since 2004. Her work has been featured in exhibitions all around the country, and she and Barbara have taught countless classes and workshops, and she has even authored several books and articles, and this is just the beginning of it. While in residence, Lynda began working on a project focused on identifying single-panel Diné rug dresses across various institutional collections with the goal of creating a database to document and track panels that have been separated over the years. Additionally, she started working on a pictorial tapestry that will speak to the history of panel dresses and collections. Despite being literally the single busiest person I have ever met, I don't understand how she does this. Lynda has gone out of her way to make time for SAR staff and campus visitors. We will absolutely miss having her and her husband Velvin on campus when they leave and hope that they will come back very soon. So please join me in welcoming Lynda Teller Pete.
Thank you. Thank you. She'eyaha Lynda Teller Pete ninja tabahin shlon tohed lini bashashin lashchi eyaha dashache hatnagahne edashinala dit outsan in the shle daislo eya bena nishigi ayese shlnjondo a banasha. Good afternoon or evening. I'm Lynda Teller Pete. I am Edgewater, my mother's clan, and my father's clan is two waters that flow together. And my grandfathers are Red Bottoms clan and one who walks around. And that's who I am as a Navajo woman. I am also a 5th generation Navajo weaver. And I just want to say that with all the things that Alicia mentioned, I just got a little bit tired. But you know what really energized me was the fact that places like SAR and IARC, places like that really support Native people to push us to advance and to do our best. And I'm so grateful to the staff for helping me accomplish some of my goals. I think I bit off more than I could chew when I decided I'm going to apply for this fellowship. I'm going to get this done in 3 months. My work is just beginning. It's just beginning and it's mushrooming. And I have the support of the greatest staff, and they will continue to look out for me. And I really appreciate that. So thank you so much to the school, to the staff. Some of you are volunteers, some of you are docents, and I just really appreciate all that is available to Indian artists like me here. I come from the Two Gray Hills area here in New Mexico, but I've lived in Denver for the last 30 years. And my husband, Belvin, is also Navajo, and he's from the Navajo Nation as well. And his clan is Arrow people and Red Bottoms clan. And so when I introduce him, I always say, he's Cupid. So my family was headed by very strong women. My grandmothers, both on my paternal and my maternal side, and my mother. My mother was very disciplined in her weaving. She made sure that all of us knew how to weave. My sister and I probably started out around 6 years old, and we sat facing each other all the time weaving. And as sisters go, sometimes you don't always get along. And so sometimes we have an arsenal of weaving tools at our disposal. And so you start to kind of annoy each other a little bit. And my mom would come in and she would put a sheet between us so that we wouldn't see each other. And so that is just kind of a glimpse into how I grew up. But as I started realizing a lot of what my family does, as a kid, you think other families do the same thing, that there are other weavers, that the whole world is comprised of weavers, and it's not. And so when I started going to school and everything, I realized that there are other people who do other types of artwork. And I was so lucky that I had two older sisters that were master weavers, and our whole family, you have a job. When you're in a family of weavers, you have a job. You don't get to slack off. So there are tool makers. We have to help out with all the things that are required to keep the house together while our mom was weaving. And so every night that I went to sleep, I could hear the little heartbeat of the comb, and that lulled me to sleep. And in the morning, my mom would weave with a little bit more energy, and it would wake me up. And so I grew up with the heartbeats of my mother's weaving, and sometimes my grandmother would come over, and I would listen to her talking about her daughters-in-law that she was trying to teach. Now, in the Navajo tradition, Navajo men marry and they move to their wives' homesteads. Not in the Tugray Hill, Newcomb, Taulina areas. The in-law wives want to come to our communities because they want to learn how to weave. And so none of my uncles left. And it was up to my grandmother to teach the in-laws, and she would get really frustrated. And I was the lookout person. I'm the last person in the family. So my mom would say, "Look out for your grandmother." So I would look out the window, and I said, "She's coming." And my mom would say, "How is she walking?" I said, "Oh, Mom, her skirts are flying." And that meant she was upset, right? So my mom says, "I better make something to eat. Coffee's just not going to work." So then my grandmother would come in, and she would carry a ball of roving and her spindle, and she'd be walking. She comes in, and she starts to put her spindle down, and she's spinning, and she's complaining. So we're all there just listening. And the minute she's done, and this may take about 2 hours to 3 hours, the minute she's done, whether she was in the middle of a story or not, she would put her spindle through and then she'd just walk out. And we're like, what happened? What's the end of the story? So begun our family of talkers, tellers. And that's my last name. My maiden name is Teller. My grandfather came from Canyon del Muerto, from Canyon de Chelly. And so our stories about weaving, our prayers about weaving, all of the things that we believe in, the beauty way that we march to is all from my father's side. My mother did not grow up with her mother, only because her father died. And so my grandmother had to get remarried. So the older 4 girls were kind of farmed out to other family members. And so that's how we grew up. And because of that, my mother was determined to really cut some of the generational trauma that she had carried with her. And so she became fanatical about making sure that we knew how to speak Navajo, that we wove every day, and that we told our stories, and that we kept it in our family. She also became a photographer. She would always have a camera around. And women would come to the store at the Two Gray Hills Trading Post. I forgot to mention that my father was a trader at the Two Gray Hills Trading Post for 35 years. And so weavers would come to our apartment, and our mother would take photographs of the women's weavings. She took 3 photographs. She kept one for herself, one to stay with the weaving, and one for the weaver. And so at that time, she was archiving things that I didn't even know was happening. And my mother lived until about 87. Up until about 82, she was very sharp. We could take a photo out and say, "Mom, who's this?" And she would say, "That's Catherine Nathaniel's rug, and I believe she got $2,000 for it." You know, and she was really sharp about that. And so it's with this type of living that I carry. I'm now the family's historian, and I am the storyteller. And so we have 7 generations in our family. We lost our mother back in 2014, I'm sorry. And so now it's kind of a little bit odd to me that Barbara, my older sister, and we're now the elders. And it's weird not having parents to talk things with. But as our family is growing, you know, I stay in touch with my sister Barbara's has 2 grandsons, and the older grandson, we have Navajo classes every Wednesday, and so it's a way for me to get him to really latch on to the stories that I held on to when I was a kid. And my mother's biggest thing was when you came home and you're like, "Hey, I did this in school. I got a job or whatever," and she just, you know, she would say, "Oh, that's really nice. I'm so proud of you." The last question she would ask is, "Are you weaving?" And so I say that to the 8-year-old grandson, "Are you weaving?" And he says, "Yeah, I think about it. I'm going to weave this summer." So he has finished a piece. This summer, he started it last summer, and so we're really proud of the fact that the weaving will continue in our family. And just a little bit about the second generations. The second and third are my grandmother Susie Tom and her mother Diné Ibitse. And so we have, let's see, that's Susie Tom. And that's her mother, Diné Ibitse. And the piece that you see behind them, they probably wove that like in the late 1950s, I believe. And that has color in it. It has a turquoise color. And it was woven during the time of Willard Layton when he was leasing the store at the Two Gray Hills Trading Post. And he liked color. So for about 11 years, there was color in the traditional Two Grays. After he passed in 1959, it went back to the original natural blended colors. And so my mom never had a chance to weave with color. And she has always resented it. And I never knew that. And there were times that I would spend a lot of time with her and I would question her and I was recording her. And she was saying that she thought she would always weave with color. And it wasn't until after she became unable to weave and she went through some medical hardships that my sister and I got one of our students from Japan that came from Tokyo, gave us a little plastic loom, and we gave it to our mom, and her eyes sparkled and she said, "Let me warp this with the Navajo warp." And she did that and she started weaving again. And we gave her a big old basket of our leftover wool colors from our classes. And she got to weave with color. Not only that, she amassed a whole bunch of them. We're like, what are we going to do with this stuff? And so I created a Facebook page for her and I let her advertise her little weavings. And she wanted to sell it for $20, and I kept saying, "That's too low, Mom." And she goes, "No, I'm just going to do 20. Until it got to the point where we were saying, "Mom, you got to hurry because you've got lots of orders." And so then she says, "Okay, we'll raise it to 25. And so it was really cool to see the beginning of her life and how she instilled the values that she had in me to the end of her life, where all she wanted to do was hold her comb to make herself feel better. And so I've lost both. This is my mom. That's my Aunt Margaret. My Aunt Margaret has had her own sheep, and that's our signature red-brown color that we use in a lot of our Tugre Hills. I have my last remaining aunt. She's from the second family, Mary Louise Gould. She's still alive. She's still weaving, and she's a badass weaver. I'll have to admit. She made a deal with, one of the casinos that was going in was making a deal with her, and they reneged after she finished weaving a 2-year project. They reneged on her and told her that they were no longer going to honor the deal. So she took her piece to Richardson's in Gallup, sold it, came back in her brand new truck, drove it to the casino, gave them their quarter deposit back. And life goes on. And that's how we roll in our community. So my 2 older sisters, Roseanne and Barbara, this is Roseanne, she's the oldest, and that's Barbara. They put the mark of Tugre Hill weavings. If it wasn't already on the map, it is firmly cemented now because of their efforts to make a huge weaving in 1987. And for those of you that live here in Santa Fe and come to Santa Fe Indian Market, not a market goes by that somebody walks up to us and says, I remember that rug. I remember the Best of Show winner. And they go, when was that? And we say, 1987. And they're like, I thought it was just 10 years ago. Because people's memories are so sharp about this piece that it set the mark for the highest amount that was ever sold. When my sisters were working on it, it took them 4 years to work on it. And they set a price and they set goals for this particular piece. They said, we're not going to have a middleman. We're going to sell it on our own. We have goals. And it changed the trajectory of all of our lives. They were both able to buy homes with it. My sister Barbara put her husband through pharmacy school. And it just changed a lot about how we lived and how now when we weave, we get to keep all the money. And that we do the hard work, and that is another crusade that I'm on to where magnificent weavings should be named after the weavers and not after the marketers and not after a place name. Like the Hubba rug, that really bugs me. The Hubba rug is the Julia Joe rug. Julia Joe spent 4 years weaving that piece, and it should be named after her. And so that's one thing about Navajo weaving is that we, Navajo weavers have been surviving since Bosco Redondo. And we have a lot more work cut out for us. And so I hope when we lost my older sister, Roseanne, in 1996, I had a government job. And I was pretty miserable in that job. And so after she left, there was a dark period that we went into, and my mother called us all home. And she said, you guys have to keep weaving. Here are your sister's tools. We need to divide them up, but you need to keep weaving. And so that's what we did. And then I started thinking, if Roseanne's boys get married and they have children, who's going to teach them how to weave? Who's going to tell them the stories? Who's going to tell them the history of our ancestors? How my great-grandfather was brought back as a 3-year-old from Bosco Redondo. All of these stories that we have need to be kept in the family. And so I took on that task. I quit my job, and that's what I'm doing now, is to further the education part, and also to really put the weavers first. You know, lots and lots of books have been written. None have been written by Navajo weavers. And so a lot of times when I'm reading things or people have opinions from the rug experts, my question is always, have you talked to a weaver? Did you get the weaver's opinion about whatever, the subject is? And the answer is always no. And so our 6th generation are Barbara's children, Sierra and Michael, and both of them are master weavers in their own rights. Sierra has really gone on to become a different type of storyteller. She is a showrunner in Hollywood, and so she keeps a loom in her office. And so a lot of times when the writing staff gets a little bit stuck, they all go into her office and they watch her weave. And so she weaves to kind of relieve the stress and also to keep her creativity flowing. And so she does a lot with her weaving. And she doesn't join us anymore with Indian Market and stuff, but in her own way, she is still being a storyteller and keeping our family together as well. Michael, he has been a weaver since he was 12, and we asked both kids, between every 4th or 5th rug, please do a 2-gray. But both of them have not been pigeonholed like Barbara and me. Barbara and me, we got pigeonholed into doing just strictly 2-gray hills, and it took us a long time to get out of that mode. But for the 2 kids, we tell them 2-gray hills is what we're known for, and we ask that you do a small piece. And when they do, they always get a ribbon. So our 7th generation is Roxanne Lee. Her grandmother is Roseanne, and her parents were in the army when she was born in Germany, and we couldn't wait to get her to see us. When she did come when she was a year old, my mother took her into the kitchen, took some spider web off the wall and rubbed it on her palms and said, she is a weaver. And so she came to live with Belvin and me when she was 4 because her parents were still in the army. And so we kept her, and she learned how to weave. And so every year we brought her to Indian Market with us. I would have her finish a piece before she would come. And she has entered Indian Market 12 times, and she has 12 blue ribbons. Wow. And she also, at the end, she started getting very opinionated about what she would weave, and she would dye her hair to match her weaving. But one of the last pieces she did before she left for the Navy was she did a 2-gray, and it got the children's best of show. And so we're pretty proud of the 7th generation, and Sierra's 2 boys are also 7th generation, and they're well on their way. And again, I did not join my sister at Santa Fe Indian Market. She's been at Indian Market for 41 years. And so I did not join her until 2004. And I used to do beadwork, and so I did a whole bunch of velvet clothing with beadwork on it. And my sister kept saying, you need to jury in for textiles. And I kept saying, oh, you know what? Why upset the whole booth? Because we've got Sierra, we've got Michael, we've got, you, and, you don't need a 4th weaver. And she says, yes, we do. So I joined the first year, and I got a blue ribbon the first year, and she got the 2nd. And I was telling everyone, I'm just going to have 1 year of bragging rights. That's all I'm going to get, because after that, she's just going to win all the ribbons. But we're just happy when one of us wins an award, and we're all very supportive of each other. And I couldn't be prouder of the younger ones that are following us, Michael and Sierra and Roxanne, and then pretty soon it will be the 2 little boys. And Barbara and I started going into teaching as well. It's an old Navajo tradition that the ancestors say, if you reach the top of your field in whatever work that you do, the work that you're known for, it's your responsibility to teach it. It's your responsibility to pass it on. And so we started with the Herd Museum giving us a grant to teach our own people how to weave. And so every time they do an announcement, we get in excess of 200 people that sign up, and the herd can only pick 20. And so we started also with Diné College in Saley to do the same thing. And so we're really proud of the young people that come to us. And it's not just young people. It's people that are retiring from all parts of the United States. They're finally retiring from their jobs, coming back to the Navajo Nation, and they want to relearn the arts. And they want to reconnect with their lost linkages. And so we're so proud that we're a big part of our people's journeys. And the other part that we are doing is we're working with a lot of museums and academia and every place that asks us, because we feel like with collaboration with museums, the public will know the stories, the real stories about the weavers. And so we have been so lucky to be connected with Hadley Jensen, who wandered into our weaving classes a long time ago in California. And we have remained in touch, and we've worked on 2 major exhibits together, Shaped by the Loom at the Bard Graduate Center in New York, and here with Horizons at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, which is still up, by the way. There's still time to see it. And then my home museum in Denver has a whole new textile conservation staff. And I've been so lucky that my working relationship with them has resulted in a lot of good things. And I'll go back to that in a little bit later, but we also are doing a lot more with other weaving communities. And the epicenter of the Navajo weaving knockoffs is in Teotitlán de Valle in Oaxaca, Mexico. So we wandered down there into their territory. Arizona State Museum had a grant with honoring traditions, and my sister was tapped as one of the master weavers to work with Porfirio Gutierrez, who is a Zapotec dyer and weaver. And I was newly a Luz Foundation Indigenous Scholar Fellow, and with monetary support. And so I called up ASM and said, can I come along, and I'll pay my own way. I want to take the workshop with Porfirio. And they said yes. It was not even a hard sale. And so we all went down there, and we spent a week in Zapotec land, and we got to see the archaeological digs where the original Zapotec weaving designs are. And in talking with Porfirio and his family, the idea of the Navajo weaving took hold back in the 60s. That's when Kennedy had his Peace Corps that came about. And a lot of well-meaning people that worked with Central America, South America, and all of the other weaving communities, they took Navajo weaving books. And so now Zapotec has 3 generations of weavers that are doing exclusive Navajo designs. And I'm working with the Textile Museum there to see if we can put a workshop down there and try to get them to understand that some of our weavings are very sacred and that they should not be weaving those. They should not be weaving the storms. They should not be weaving our Spider Woman crosses. There's a lot that can happen if you're not doing it carefully and with the right protocols, and they don't know that. And so that's another journey that we have to take in working with the communities that, and it's no fault of their own, because the weavers there only weave what they're told to weave, much like what happened to Navajo weavers when they came back from Bosco Redondo. So everybody loves to have a weaving, and there's plenty of space in the world for artists. And so I'm letting them know that it's time to return to their own traditions of how they do their dyeing and how they tell their stories, and that the designs from their archaeological digs are there, that they should honor those. And so we have a long journey before anything happens, but at least they're willing to listen. So when I did my talk at the Textile Museum, 50 master weavers came to hear me talk. And the curator said, that's never happened before. And that's a good start. And so I think with good communications, and we do it with respect, that maybe, just maybe, they'll stop doing the Navajo designs. We also went to Tencui in Peru, and my sister Barbara and I helped out with 13 weaving communities there. And it was amazing to see how the women do their weavings. And the question that kept coming up from almost every 13 community was to Barbara. The question was, how do you get your kids to weave? Because we're having a hard time. A lot of our kids don't want to weave anymore. They don't want to spin. And so my sister was saying, well, I withhold technical stuff. They can't play games, they can't watch TV, they can't get on the internet unless they give me 30 minutes of weaving time. And so she did a lot of educating to the women that want their children to keep the weaving traditions in their family. And so I think that is something that that we're going to look forward to working with other weaving communities, because it's a peer-to-peer collaboration that probably will work best. And so we also did another trip with the Arizona sorry, I got to take a drink of water. The Historical Society. We did a Weavers seminar trip to Washington, D.C. last year in October. And Barbara and I chose 4 young weavers with us. Calandra Cook, she does pictorials. We did Tanaba Natani, who does a lot of wearable arts. Kevin Aspis, a lot of you know who Kevin is. He was here just before me. And Alicio Curley. He's a very young weaver who does a lot of chief blankets. And so we were able to visit 3 storage places in Washington, D.C. We pulled a lot of pieces out. When we first started doing this trip, the curators told us you can only pull 10 pieces at each storage place. Well, these 2 young men charmed the staff. And I think at every institution, we may have looked at 30 plus. And so it was a really good trip. And that's when I started looking at the dress panels. Some of the dress panels were by themselves. And I kept thinking, what happened to the other panels? And so I started reading the paperwork that was with them. And it was heartbreaking to me to learn that the dresses were taken apart. And so, when I came back and started working again on the Horizons exhibit with Lilia and Hadley, and we chose other weavers and other artists, Navajo artists, to join us. Darby, who's a graphic artist, Raphael Begay, who is a photographer. The other weavers were Kevin and Tyrell Tabaha, and we had a scholar, Larissa Naz. And so all of us worked on this exhibit to not just reflect ancient Navajo weaving, but weavings from there to how it morphed into today and how we look at the land base and how it encourages us to stay connected to who we are as a people, who we are as artists, and how we tell our stories. And I think that's the only way that the public will get to know the real stories, that with a good collaboration of curators and us telling the stories, and that is the wave of the future. And so that brings me to what I'm doing here. So as I was looking at all the work that I've been doing with museums, the one panel dresses really nagged at me. And what I know about dresses is that I'm not a weaver that makes dresses. That's a specialty that is honed and traditionally done from one particular family. There's also one tradition that a lot of weavers will honor. Not everybody honors it, but you cannot weave your own dress. And before anybody that asks, it just is. You just can't weave your own dress. And so you have to choose a weaver that has your same values as you. You have to choose a weaver that exhibits all the things that you are as a weaver. And so we chose Florence Riggs to do our dresses for us. And I have a picture of Juanita, a Owingeh. She's wearing a dress, that dress that she had in Bosco Redondo. You can see how big it is on her. In those days, a Navajo woman could probably have 1, maybe 2, maybe even 3 dresses at the most her entire life. They were made big, and you would get a dress at your puberty ceremony, and you would grow into it. They made the dresses bigger, and it was always cinched either by a belt, a sash belt, or a concho belt. And as women go into childbirth, the belt helps with that, and also it cinches it after after the birth. And so the dress is really important. There's so much cultural significance with the dress. The tassels represents the umbilical cords. The stripes, during the slavery period, pre-1860, Navajo weavers were targeted for slavery by slavers. Kit Carson was one of those slavers. And a lot of dressmakers started putting 4 lines, either up on the top or on the bottom or on both places. That signified a return to our 4 sacred mountains. And that if a weaver got kidnapped and sold into slavery, she wore her dress, and it was her protection. It was a protection against the environment, a protection against the slavers, and we hope that they made it home. And so the Spider Women crosses on those dresses held a special meaning for their safety. And the mantas that they wear, I go on this really big crusade about the chief blankets, because we get asked about them all the time. At Santa Fe Indian Market, people will walk up and go, "I'm looking for an old chief blanket." And we're like, "Yeah, everybody else is too." I don't know how many there are left in the world, but good luck. But the thing about it is, women's dresses have always been undervalued. The dresses, the mantas, nobody puts a value higher than a chief blanket, but they're the most beautiful. The stripes are smaller, they're thinner. The work that's done on the details, they're so much better to me than the chief blankets. And so I started doing a series of mantas for one Indian market. It was during COVID, and they separated all of us. And so they put me on the plaza, and I've never been on the plaza before. So I started researching it, and that's where they sold the weavers for slavery. And I thought that I needed to do something to bring light to that. So I started a series of miniature mantas, and I sold every single one of them because it came with a story. And from there, I thought there's a lot more that needs to be explored with the mantas and the dresses, and how dare they separate them. Because those dresses were woven with prayers, they were woven with songs. The Spider Women crosses, the old-fashioned crosses, they're there. Oop, right there. Those are the very simplistic ones, but they're red and black. And a lot of times, people will say, "Well, why is it red and black? Because you guys we didn't have the red color." Well, we traded for the red. Most of them are bayeta. Unraveled bayeta, and the black, some of it is dyed with pinon pitch, and some of it is unraveled bayeta, and they were dark, either dark indigo blue, sometimes brown, sometimes black, sometimes red, so that the weaver can escape, and it'll be camouflage if they decide to escape at night. And so the dresses really hold part of our womanhood. It's disrespectful to know that there are pieces scattered, and we don't know where they are. And so I wanted to see about finding them, and I didn't realize that it was not going to take me 3 months. So we're probably looking at 3 years instead of 3 months, because some of the, and Alicia, God bless Alicia. She's been so helpful to me in getting some of the digital files from the museums. But some of the museums, their photos are degrading. And so we're just getting like little black spots where some of it's not really, some of them are too faded. And also some of them have been mislabeled because they've been separated as saddle blankets and not as dresses. And so it's going to take a lot more for me to, in fact, it's going to have to take me to go to those institutions and do collections visits. So I think to continue my project, I'm going to have to look into some travel grants to see which dresses might match. And we had an accidental pairing last October when we went to the Chicago Field Museum. We have my sister and I are involved in a project with the Chicago Art Institute. Or did I say that right? The Chicago Institute of Art, or is it? Okay. Well, anyway, somebody correct me. But they have a global exhibition that they're working on called Loss and Absence. And so they have two amazing pieces in their collection. They have a Hosteen Claw sand painting rug, and they have a gorgeous Daisy Tucklechi rug. They didn't even know about those two weavers. So it took us almost all day to educate the staff on who these weavers are and how precious their collection was. So I got to write about them. It's going to go into their catalog, but they're going to do a revolving exhibition. So our last day there, they gave us a courtesy visit to the Chicago Field Museum. And so it was the end of the week. We're getting all tired because we have been at the Art Institute all week. The curator there asked us what we wanted to see. And I said, dress panels, single dress panels. So she had her staff roll out a bunch, and they're on individual rolling tables. And so one dress we looked at, and we spent a lot of time looking at it. And when we were done, these tables are separate. And we rolled the other table out. And as we were talking, this young man took out the other table. And then we looked at it and we were like, we just saw this dress. You didn't roll the table away? And he goes, no, this is a different dress. And we looked at it and they came in almost 100 years later. One dress came in almost 100 years later. And my sister and I, we were talking about it and we said, it's always the prayers of our ancestors that some panels will find each other. If it was made for a very special person, if it was meant to be, they will get paired up. And it has happened more times over. When I'm doing this research, I'm getting, I got an email from Arizona State Museum. It happened there. And it has happened in my home museum in Denver. These two panels came from different collections. And the Denver Museum took it one step further. They gave me a call and they said, how would you like to sew the dress back together? And they said, you're going to have to teach your conservator, Kathleen, who came from the Met. And so we did a practice session. And we had an audience, and both of us sat side by side, and we sewed the top first. And then we sewed the bottom, the sides. And I provided all the wool. I had to provide it like a couple of months ahead of time so that it would get frozen. And then thank God the panels were untreated, and so we were able to touch it with our bare hands. We weren't been able to sew with gloves on. But the institutions are now understanding how important it is for our dresses to be together. And we also are going to collaborate on the database that I am going to set up. They're going to save a small space for me to put my research there. So it will be available to the public as well as available to me to keep updating. And so in the studio, if you come to visit, this is my first thing about pictorials. I'm not a pictorial weaver. but I am going to weave 15 drug panels on this tapestry. The tapestry quality. Tapestry in the Navajo weaving wool refers to the weight of the wool and not the tapestry frame or the technique as the global world knows it. So when I say tapestry, I'm referring to the weight of the wool. So this is tapestry quality. It's probably going to be about 114 to 118 wefts per inch. But I'm going to put 15 dress panels on there. 14 are going to match. So you're going to have to look for the matching pair. One panel will not have a matching pair. And that's just to drive home the point that the dresses that are still out there are being looked for. And we're not going to forget about that. And so my research will continue. It's going to take a lot of work, and I appreciate all the support that I have gotten to this point. And my sister and I, we work together a lot, and we have been tagged to go to Dubai in February to spread our gospel of Navajo weaving, I guess. But we continue our work, and she's been slowing down a lot, but we do still do some classes together. And I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight to listen to what I have to say. So hopefully there are some questions.
So thank you so much, Lynda. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, and as I bring this around to you, please do speak into the microphone so that our Zoom friends can also hear.
I did research in the Field Museum 30 years ago on the collection given to the museum by Mr. Ayer, who built the Newberry Library and some other things like that. And with me were a mother and a son, Annie Kahn and her son Tony. And we went through the Ayer collection, which is only 20 pieces. But there was a dress in that collection, and Mrs. Kahn would not touch it. And she said it was Zuni, not Navajo. So I wonder if you saw anything in your looking through the collection that you thought was irregular.
If I thought things were irregular, there's a lot of things that are irregular. The wording bothers me the most. You know, people are still using that outdated line of lazy lines. We call it sectional lines. Lazy line is to me, it's very racist. It implies that weavers are lazy, and we're not. There's a lot of misidentification. They did not consult with weavers. And so there are a lot of irregularities that I really hope to address. And at the Field Museum, the young curator, and I forget her name, she emailed me just the other day too. But she emailed me and she sent me that photo that I showed you. After we went nuts about putting the pair back together, she asked a very important question. She said, should these dresses be together? And we said, yes, they've been apart for 100 years. Put them in the same box. So, you know, who knows? Maybe one of these days we'll get to sew it back together as it was meant to be.
I congratulate your work. It's fabulous.
Thank you.
As someone who doesn't know that much about weaving, when you see a piece that's mislabeled as a saddle blanket, what's the difference that you're looking at? I mean, is it that obvious? Is it the design? Is it the weight?
Okay, there's two sizes for saddle blankets. The sizes are 30 by 30, which is called a single. A double saddle blanket that's meant to be folded is a 60 by 30. Saddle blankets are traditionally not red and black. They don't have the intricate designs on there. They may have some border designs, and normally saddle blankets are thick. They're made with bulky weight yarn. Dresses are fine because it's, when we wear our dresses, we have to wear something underneath it because we're wearing commercial wool that's woven in there, and it's really scratchy. And so in the old days, though, they were making it out of unraveled bayeta, which is a little softer. It's like flannel. And it drapes really nice, too. So you can tell a big difference. I mean, to the unexperienced eye, you can still tell that it's different.
So when you were at the Field Museum and these pieces were together, wasn't there like a filming that was online that we could see the sewing together part?
Not at the Field Museum. We had the sewing together was at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
So that was a different dress.
That was a different dress.
Okay, that's so exciting. I really appreciate all that you're doing here and really opening up where people are beginning to see things that haven't been seen and understand the significance of what we're missing and how these things were treated, and also bringing to light women's textiles in all of these different cultures. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Who wants to be at? No one? There's one somewhere. Where? Oh, right here? Okay. We'll do two really quick.
When you're looking at in the different museums at pieces, and I don't know how thorough the documentation is, but are you able to see patterns that you can say, oh, this was such and such weaver, even if it's not necessarily noted in the documentation? I mean, can you tell, different designs that said, oh, it's definitely from such and such person?
No. And unfortunately, that is one of the things that has really bothered us is that when weavings were done, they didn't think it was important to collect the weaver's name, have a picture with it, something. So a lot of what has been tagged on there are people that are not familiar with Navajo weaving. And so they make statements based on their background, their experience. They're making an assumption about Navajo weaving that is not true and totally off-the-wall bunkers. And I've read so much stuff that I'm just like, where do these people come from? But yeah, my thing is, I'm hoping that I'm starting to see something similar like what you're suggesting, that maybe I can see some weavings that are similar. But the museums are so spread out. I have an invitation to go to the De Young in San Francisco with, they're willing to pay my travel to go there to look at their collection. And so, they may have a panel that matches one at AMNH in New York or something. And so it would be really hard without getting them side by side to see the similarities. And that's why it's so important to have some really good close-up photos. And a lot of museum budgets do not have that in their they don't have the budget to retake photographs.
Our last question here.
Hi, I went to the show that you're curated at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, and I was so moved and impressed that you labeled things made by a known Navajo weaver, and I wondered if you could speak about that.
Sure. The other thing that has, and this really goes back to my sister Barbara. My sister Barbara has been a trailblazer in working with museums. She did an artist in residency program at the Heard Museum for 4 years. And to this day, this woman will not listen to flute music because it was piped in, and and she raised her kids at the museum. Both kids, Michael specifically learned how to walk at the museum. And so she is really entrenched in working with museums and stuff. but I'm sorry.
Names.
I'm sorry?
Artist names.
Oh, yes. So when she was at the Heard Museum, and she was doing demonstrations, people would often ask her, "Are you able to do like a burnt water? Are you able to do a period piece, a child's blanket?" So that's how she started branching out and outside the Tugre Hill style. And she would go to the museum pieces and look at them. And she said that what really bothered her was there were no names. And it would just say unknown. And she goes, "I hate that." She said, "Doesn't that word just it's not a good word?" And I said, "Yeah." And so we started talking about it one time, and I said, my sister said, they were known to their families. They were known to their communities. They were known to other weavers. And so that's how we came up with artists once known. And so it's so much better than just unknown.
So let's go ahead and give Lynda another round of applause.